Captain Adrian Ellis stood at the helm of the Perseus, his fingers lightly tapping on the console. The vast, black expanse of space stretched endlessly before him. For weeks, they had been scanning this newly discovered star system, but so far, they had found nothing more than empty space and distant planets. It was a quiet mission, one that allowed the crew to rest after the chaos of their last operation. But Adrian knew better than to let his guard down completely. In the world of space exploration, peace was often the calm before the storm. As he stared out the viewport, a sudden ping echoed across the ship's communication system. His eyes narrowed. The message was from an unknown source. An alien ship, the signal faint but unmistakable. Adrian raised an eyebrow. How could they miss this on the scans? "Open a channel," he ordered, his voice steady despite the rising sense of curiosity. The ship's AI, known as Rhea, complied. The screen flickered, and then an image appeared. At first, all they saw was a strange, silver-blue shape in the distance. Then it moved into focus, revealing an enormous alien vessel. The ship was unlike anything they had ever seen, sleek, organic, and almost alive in its design. Its surface pulsed gently, as though breathing. "Captain Ellis," a calm voice echoed from the speakers. It was soft but firm. "I am Queen Zelaria of the Kalji." Adrian's crew exchanged nervous glances. They had studied alien life forms, of course, but nothing had prepared them for this. A queen. An alien species that was clearly advanced enough to reach them. Adrian stepped forward, trying to keep his voice steady. "Queen Zelaria, this is Captain Adrian Ellis of the Earth Federation. What is the meaning of your message?" The Queen's image shimmered, and then, to Adrian's shock, she bowed her head slightly. It wasn't just a gesture of respect, it was a sign of submission. Her entire presence seemed to change in that moment. There was something ancient in her, something powerful. Adrian couldn't help but feel a strange mix of awe and unease. "I have waited for you," she said, her voice echoing with a strange resonance. "You are the one we have been searching for, the one who will lead us to victory." Adrian's heart skipped a beat. "Lead you to victory? What do you mean?" He couldn't make sense of her words. The Queen lifted her head, her eyes locking onto his through the screen. "I have seen the prophecy, Captain. You are the one who will help us defeat our enemies. You are the one who will save us." Adrian was speechless. His mind raced, trying to process what she had just said. A prophecy? What enemies? What did this queen want with him? Before he could respond, the Queen's next words took him completely by surprise. She slowly dropped to one knee. The gesture was formal, respectful, and strangely intimate. Her voice, when she spoke again, was filled with awe. "You are the key to our survival, the one we have awaited for centuries. Please, Captain Ellis, help us." Adrian's mind swirled with confusion and doubt. This was no ordinary alien encounter. He could feel the weight of her words, and in that moment, he realized that whatever lay ahead would change everything. Captain Adrian Ellis stood in the quiet command room of the Perseus, still processing the strange encounter with Queen Zelaria. The image of the alien queen kneeling before him was burned into his mind. What kind of prophecy? What does she mean by saving them? Adrian turned to his crew, who were watching him intently, their faces a mixture of confusion and concern. "Rhea," he said, his voice firm, "can you tell me more about this alien race, the Kalji? Anything that might help us understand this situation better?" Rhea's soft, electronic voice filled the room. "The Kalji are an ancient species, Captain. They have a highly advanced civilization, but are currently in a state of war with a species known as the Vrax. There is little information on the Kalji outside of what we've gathered from distant signals and records." Adrian nodded, his brow furrowed. It wasn't much to go on, but it was enough to know that these aliens were in trouble, and somehow it seemed like they believed he held the key to their survival. As the crew continued to work, Adrian received a new communication from Queen Zelaria. She had requested a meeting, one that would explain more about the prophecy she had mentioned. With little to go on, and many questions in his mind, Adrian agreed. The Perseus was soon docked on the Khalji flagship, a massive living ship that felt more like a part of the Queen herself than a separate vessel. Adrian's heart raced as he followed a small group of Khalji soldiers through the corridors of the ship. The walls seemed to pulse with a strange energy, as though the ship itself was alive. When Adrian and his crew entered the Queen's chamber, they were met with an overwhelming sight. Queen Zelaria stood at the far end, surrounded by holographic images that seemed to float in the air. The images displayed vast star systems, planets in flames, and battles being fought across the galaxy. "The Vraks are a brutal species," the Queen began, her voice calm but heavy with the weight of experience. "They have destroyed countless civilizations, and now they are coming for us. Our people have fought them for centuries, but we are losing. Our weapons are powerful, but not enough. Our forces are scattered, and our spirits are broken." Adrian studied the images closely. The Vraks seemed like an unstoppable force, their ships massive and terrifying, their warriors ruthless. But there was something in the way the Queen spoke that caught his attention. It was clear she had lived through unimaginable losses, but there was also something in her eyes. Hope, perhaps. "Our ancestors foretold of a time when a human would come to us," the Queen continued, her voice softening. "A human who would bring us the strength and the strategy we need to overcome the Vraks. This human would be a leader, someone with the heart of a warrior and the mind of a strategist, someone who could inspire us to fight once again." Adrian's heart pounded in his chest as he realized she was talking about him. "Me? A leader?" She nodded as though reading his thoughts. "Yes, Captain Ellis. The prophecy speaks of a human who would unite the Khalji and lead us to victory. Your kind has something we do not: an unmatched resilience, a fierce will to survive. You are the one who can change our fate." Adrian took a deep breath, trying to absorb the weight of her words. He wasn't sure if he was ready for this, but it seemed clear that the Khalji believed in him. And in that moment, Adrian knew he couldn't back down. There was too much at stake. "I'll help you," he said, his voice steady despite the storm raging in his mind. "But I need to know more about the Vraks. What exactly are we up against?" Captain Adrian Ellis sat across from Queen Zelaria in the dimly lit war room of the Khalji flagship. The walls around him were lined with strange, floating holographic displays, showing the galaxy and the various star systems under Khalji control. But what caught his attention most was the central projection, an image of a terrifying alien ship, dark and sleek, with a jagged design that resembled nothing Adrian had seen before. "This is the Vraks warship," Queen Zelaria said, her voice cold as she gestured to the image. Massive, heavily armored, and armed with weapons capable of destroying entire planets, their forces are relentless, and their hunger for conquest is endless. Adrian stared at the ship, trying to take in its terrifying size. It was unlike anything human technology could match. He had heard of brutal alien races in his training, but nothing prepared him for the reality of facing the Vraks. "Are they the only threat?" he asked, his voice steady but his mind racing. The Queen shook her head slowly. "No, the Vraks are not just a military force. They are a culture built on war and destruction. They have consumed countless worlds, each time growing stronger. What makes them more dangerous is their ability to adapt quickly. They study their enemies and evolve strategies to destroy them. They don't just invade, they annihilate." Adrian felt a cold shiver run down his spine. It was clear the Vraks weren't a simple enemy to defeat. Their adaptability was their greatest weapon, and that made them unpredictable. The Khalji had fought them for centuries, but it seemed like each battle was lost before it even began. The Queen continued, her eyes intense as she spoke. "Our technology is advanced, but it has limitations. We have lost many battles trying to match the Vraks in direct combat. They outnumber us, and their tactics are superior. We cannot fight them alone." That is why we need you." Adrian leaned forward, his mind spinning. "What exactly do you want me to do? How can humans fight an enemy this powerful?" Queen Zalaria's eyes softened, and she placed a hand on a nearby console. Another hologram flickered to life, showing a series of battle plans. The Vraks may be stronger, but they have a weakness, a central command structure. Their leadership relies heavily on a small group of warlords, the ones who make the key decisions. If we can disrupt their command chain, we can bring chaos to their ranks. The problem is that we've never been able to get close enough to strike. They always detect us before we can act. Adrian thought about her words carefully. Striking at the heart of the Vraks' leadership was the only way to weaken them, but how could they infiltrate such a dangerous force? The idea of facing the Vraks directly was daunting, but the more he thought about it, the clearer the answer became. "I think I know what we need to do," Adrian said, a plan forming in his mind. "We'll need to be unpredictable. We can't fight them head-on. But if we play to humanity's strengths, tactics, adaptability, guerrilla warfare, we might just stand a chance." Queen Zalaria's gaze brightened, a flicker of hope in her eyes. "Exactly. Your people have fought wars like this before. You understand how to turn the tide in unexpected ways." Adrian nodded, feeling a sense of purpose settle in. This wasn't just about military strategy anymore. This was about survival, not just for humanity, but for the Khalji as well. He looked at the Queen, his voice steady but resolute. "We'll hit them where it hurts. We'll break their command, and when their leadership falls apart, we'll attack. This is the only way we'll have a fighting chance." The Queen smiled, a rare expression of genuine hope crossing her face. "Then it's settled. We will fight together." Adrian took a deep breath, knowing that the battle ahead would not be easy. But with the weight of the Khalji's survival on his shoulders, he felt a new fire ignite inside him. The fight for the galaxy had just begun. The Perseus drifted silently through space, its crew preparing for the next phase of their mission. Captain Adrian Ellis stood in front of the star map in the ship's command center, his mind racing with the weight of the coming battle. The plan was simple but risky. Disrupt the Vraks' command structure by targeting their high-ranking warlords, all while avoiding direct confrontation with their powerful fleet. Behind him, the crew worked with intensity, calibrating weapon systems, reviewing intelligence, and adjusting their strategy. The Khalji, despite their advanced technology, were still learning from humanity's unique methods of warfare. Adrian knew that if they were going to succeed, they needed to be quick, clever, and unpredictable. Adrian's thoughts were interrupted as Queen Zalaria stepped into the room, her presence as regal and imposing as ever. She had insisted on joining them on the Perseus for the mission, her people's fate intertwined with humanity's plans. She moved with grace, her glowing skin reflecting the soft light from the star map. Her sharp eyes were focused, but there was something softer in her gaze now, a mix of respect and trust toward Adrian and his crew. "Captain," she said, her voice low but powerful, "I have spoken to my people. They are ready to follow your lead." Adrian turned, nodding. "We're all in this together, but we'll need more than just your people's trust. We need to be unified. No more hesitation." The Queen nodded, acknowledging the challenge ahead. "We may be different, but we both understand the importance of survival, and we will fight together." With the Queen's forces now on board, the crew of the Perseus trained with the Khalji soldiers, learning their combat techniques and familiarizing themselves with their alien technology. Though the Khalji were a formidable species, their soldiers had never fought alongside humans. Adrian's team had to learn how to combine their strengths, human adaptability and resourcefulness, with Khalji power and technology. The training was intense. The Khalji soldiers were excellent in close combat, their lithe bodies able to move with incredible speed. Adrian's crew, on the other hand, relied on precision and strategy. The two groups were an odd mix, but as the days passed, their teamwork improved. It was clear that both sides had much to learn from each other. One afternoon, after a particularly intense training session, Adrian sat down with Queen Zelaria. They were alone in a quiet part of the ship, the hum of the engines the only sound around them. "You've been through so much," Adrian said, his voice quiet. "How do you keep going? How do you keep your people fighting?" Zelaria looked out of the window at the stars. Her face was a mask of calm, but Adrian could sense the pain beneath it. "It is not just my people I fight for," she said softly. "It is the memory of those we have lost. The Vraks have taken so much from us. Our ancestors, our cities, our worlds. But there is still hope. As long as we fight, there is hope." Adrian felt a heavy weight in his chest. He understood her words more than he cared to admit. Humanity had faced similar losses in its own history: wars, invasions, and destruction. But this was different. This was an enemy that didn't just seek to conquer, they sought to erase. "We'll help you," Adrian said, his voice firm. "We'll fight, and we'll win. Together." Zelaria turned to him, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and something deeper: trust. "I believe in you, Captain. You are the leader we have waited for." The words were heavy, but Adrian knew there was no turning back now. The alliance between humans and Khalji was their only chance. If they failed, the galaxy would fall into darkness. And Adrian couldn't let that happen. The Perseus moved closer to the first target on their list, the Vrak stronghold on the planet Xoreth. The time had come to put their plan into action. And for the first time since this journey began, Adrian felt a sense of purpose. He wasn't just fighting for survival. He was fighting for the future. The Perseus sailed through the endless void, its sleek body gliding through the stars as the crew prepared for their most dangerous mission yet. They were headed toward Xoreth, a barren world on the edge of Vrax-controlled space. The planet itself was nothing more than a massive military base, hidden in plain sight, its surface dotted with warships, hidden defenses, and the Vrax command center, the heart of the enemy's power. Captain Adrian Ellis stood in the command center, his eyes fixed on the holographic map of the system. The time for plans and training was over. Now it was time to strike. "Rhea," he said, his voice steady but filled with determination, "begin the approach. Let's make sure we're undetected until we're in position." "Aye, Captain," came Rhea's calm response. Adrian glanced at the Khalji officers standing beside him. Queen Zelaria had insisted that her best warriors accompany the Perseus on this mission. Her people were skilled in stealth and speed, and their advanced technology was invaluable. However, it wasn't just the Khalji forces that made Adrian feel confident. It was the bond his crew had forged with them. Together, they were more than allies. They were a family united by a single goal: to destroy the Vraks. As the ship neared Xoreth's orbit, Adrian's heart began to race. They had carefully planned their approach, staying under the radar, taking advantage of asteroid fields, and using the planet's natural ion storms to hide their ship. They needed to get in close without alerting the Vraks to their presence. "All systems are green, Captain," Lieutenant Mara said, her eyes focused on the control panel. "We're on track for the strike." Adrian nodded, feeling the surge of adrenaline. "Prepare for deployment. We move in 5 minutes." Queen Zelaria stepped forward, her dark eyes unwavering. "We will fight together," she said, "but we must be swift. Once we engage, there will be no turning back." "I understand," Adrian replied. "We'll make this quick." We're hitting their command center hard and fast. The next few minutes felt like an eternity. The tension in the air was thick as the crew double-checked their weapons, systems, and coordinates. The time for hesitation was over. They were about to enter the heart of enemy territory. "Approaching target," Rhea announced. "Enemy defenses remain undetected." Adrian gave a sharp nod. "Deploy the Khalji strike teams." We hit the command center first. With swift precision, the Khalji soldiers moved into position. Their sleek, powerful bodies seemed to blend into the shadows as they prepared for the assault. The humans followed, ready to support their allies at a moment's notice. Adrian stood tall, his voice unwavering. "Once we breach the command center, we'll split into 2 teams. The first team takes out their communications and leadership. The second team secures the entire building. Let's make sure they don't have a chance to regroup." As the plan was set into motion, the Perseus hovered just outside the Vrak stronghold, cloaked by the planet's stormy atmosphere. The alien warships were in full patrol mode, but they had no idea what was coming. The crew of the Perseus had one advantage: the element of surprise. The air on the bridge grew heavy with anticipation as the countdown began. Every second felt like an eternity. 50 seconds, Mara called out. Adrian's mind was calm, focused. He thought of his crew, the Khalji, and the billions of lives that depended on their success. They couldn't fail. 20 seconds, Ria's voice echoed in the room. The final moments passed in a blur. Adrian stood at the center, his hand gripping the edge of the console, his eyes sharp and ready. "Now," he commanded. The Perseus surged forward, cutting through the atmosphere toward the Vrak stronghold below. The crew's hearts pounded as the ship dove toward the planet's surface, the stormy skies splitting open as the stealth technology flickered. The attack had begun. Adrian couldn't afford to hesitate. Not now, not when the future of the galaxy was on the line. The battle for Xoreth was about to begin. The Perseus broke through the clouds of Xoreth, its sleek hull cutting through the thick atmosphere. Below, the Vrak stronghold loomed, its jagged structures and massive warships forming a fortress of terror. The countdown was over, and now there was no turning back. The crew of the Perseus had one shot at this. If they failed, the Vraks would retaliate with overwhelming force. Captain Adrian Ellis stood in the command center, his eyes locked on the screen in front of him. The target was in sight, and the ship was close enough to make their move. He could feel the tension rising, but he forced himself to stay calm. Every decision now mattered. "Ria, take us into the heart of the stronghold," Adrian ordered, his voice firm. "Stay low, stay fast." "Aye, Captain," came the ice-cool response. The ship dipped lower, cutting through the storm clouds, with the Vrak's fortress coming into clear view. Adrian knew they had moments, maybe seconds, before the Vraks would detect their approach. On board, the Khalji soldiers were already in position, their life bodies moving swiftly through the corridors of the ship. The humans followed, each one prepared for the chaos that awaited them. The plan was simple: breach the Vrak's command center, destroy their leadership, and sow chaos within their ranks. It was a high-risk mission, but they had the element of surprise on their side. For now, approaching the target zone, Mara, the ship's pilot, said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline rushing through the crew's veins. "We're within range. Deploy the Khalji strike teams," Adrian ordered. "Make sure we have complete control of the ground as soon as we land." As the Perseus descended toward the planet's surface, the Khalji soldiers prepared to disembark. They had been trained for stealth and speed, and they would be the first to land and infiltrate the command center. Adrian and his human crew would follow behind, ready to neutralize any threats. The Perseus finally touched down on the outskirts of the Vrak stronghold. The landing was smooth, and the air around them was thick with dust and static electricity. The Vrak's defenses were still unaware of their presence, but that wouldn't last long. Adrian took a deep breath, steeling himself for the chaos that was about to unfold. "Move out," Adrian ordered. His team, alongside the Khalji soldiers, sprinted toward the fortress entrance. Their footsteps were light, their movements quick. The Khalji led the charge, their glowing eyes scanning the darkness for any signs of danger. As they entered the fortress, the cold walls seemed to close in around them. The air smelled of oil and burnt metal, the hum of machinery vibrating through the floor. It was clear that the Vraks had been preparing for war, but the Perseus crew was about to bring that war to an unexpected halt. Adrian's heart raced, But his mind was sharp. They had to disable the Vrax's communication systems first. Without those, the enemy would be disorganized, unable to coordinate their defenses. Once they had that advantage, the battle would be theirs. "Captain," Zalaria's voice crackled through his comms. "The command center is ahead. We're almost there. Stay focused." Adrian nodded, pushing forward with renewed determination. "Stay sharp, everyone. We breach in 5. As they neared the command center's entrance, a sudden explosion rocked the hallway. The blast echoed through the building, throwing the soldiers off balance. Adrian ducked behind cover, his pulse racing as the air filled with the sound of distant alarms. "They found us," Mara reported, her voice tense. "We've got incoming." The sound of Vrax soldiers echoed from the other side of the hallway. They were coming in full force now, their brutal forms charging toward the team. Adrian's eyes narrowed. This was it. They had been detected, and the Vrax would throw everything they had at them. But the Perseus crew had already shown that they could take on the impossible. Now, it was time to prove it again. "Push forward," Adrian shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. "We take them down now." With weapons raised, the team moved forward, ready to face whatever came next. The fight for Xoreth had begun in earnest, and there would be no retreat. The fate of the galaxy depended on their success. The sound of gunfire echoed through the narrow metallic hallways of the Vrax fortress. Adrian Ellis's heart pounded in his chest as he ducked behind a reinforced wall, narrowly avoiding a blast from a Vrax soldier's plasma weapon. His team was pinned down, but they couldn't afford to stay put for long. Every moment spent in cover gave the Vrax more time to regroup. "Captain, the Vrax are everywhere," Mara shouted over the comms. "We're being surrounded." Adrian's mind raced. The plan had been simple: disable the communication systems, breach the command center, and take down their leadership. But the Vrax had responded faster than expected. The element of surprise had lasted only a few minutes before all hell broke loose. Now, they were caught in a full-on firefight with no way out. "We push through," Adrian barked, voice firm despite the chaos around him. "Focus on the Vrax soldiers blocking our path. We can't let them slow us down." Queen Zalaria's voice came over the comms, her tone calm but filled with determination. "We are with you, Captain. The Khalji will hold the rear. You have our support." Adrian nodded, grateful for the Queen's support. Her soldiers had proven to be as ruthless as the Vrax, moving swiftly and decisively. They would protect the flanks, allowing Adrian's team to push forward. "Move out," Adrian ordered. With a loud shout, the crew of the Perseus and their Khalji allies surged forward, weapons raised and firing as they moved. The Vrax soldiers, who were heavily armored and armed with devastating energy weapons, fell back in an attempt to regroup. But Adrian's team was relentless, cutting through the enemy ranks with precision. Adrian took a deep breath, focusing on his next move. He was leading them deeper into the heart of the fortress. The command center was close now, just a few more corridors to cross. His mind replayed the plan. They couldn't stop now. They reached the entrance to the command center, a massive reinforced door made of black steel, heavily guarded by Vrax soldiers. The door was locked, but there was no time to waste on trying to hack it open. Adrian gave a quick nod to Rhea, who was already analyzing the door's security. 30 seconds, Captain, Rhea called, her voice steady despite the battle raging around them. "I'll have this open." Just then, the Vrax soldiers pressed in harder. Their powerful weapons fired, sending shockwaves through the air. Adrian dove to the side, narrowly avoiding another blast. He returned fire, his aim true, taking out 2 soldiers with well-placed shots. "Keep them off, Rhea," Adrian shouted to the others. Zalaria and her soldiers leaped into action, using their speed and agility to overwhelm the Vrax forces. They moved in a blur, striking down enemy soldiers with precision, their alien weapons cutting through the air. The Khalji had the advantage in hand-to-hand combat, and they used it to great effect, keeping the Vrax at bay long enough for Rhea to finish her work. Done. Rhea shouted triumphantly as the door slid open with a hiss. We're in. Adrian didn't hesitate. He led the charge into the command center, his team following close behind. The space inside was massive, filled with control consoles, holographic displays, and a large central platform that seemed to pulse with power. At the far end of the room stood the Vrax leadership, a group of warlords, heavily armored and standing in the midst of chaos. The warlords turned toward the intruders, their red eyes glowing with fury. The leader of the Vrax, a towering figure in black armor, raised his hand, signaling his soldiers to fall back and prepare for the final defense. We've got company, Hadrian shouted, raising his weapon as he advanced. Take them down. The fight was brutal. The Vrax warlords were unlike anything Adrian had ever faced. Fast, strong, and relentless. Their weapons crackled with energy as they engaged in close combat, forcing Adrian's team to use every ounce of training and strategy they had. The Khalji soldiers fought with a ferocity that matched the Vrax, clashing in a violent dance of destruction. Adrian's mind focused on the leader, the one who had caused so much pain, so much suffering. He had to bring him down. The fate of the galaxy rested on their success. With a battle cry, Adrian surged forward, his weapon raised. He had no time for hesitation. This was the moment that would define everything. The war for Xoreth was far from over, but if they could take down the Vrax leadership, they would have a chance. The command center erupted into chaos. The Vrax warlords, towering figures in black armor, fought fiercely against Adrian and his crew. The Perseus team had trained for months for this moment, but nothing could have prepared them for the sheer power and speed of the Vrax. Their weapons crackled with destructive energy, lighting up the dark room with bursts of red and blue. Adrian dove to the side as a blast of energy narrowly missed him. His heart raced, but his mind stayed sharp. The leader of the Vrax warlords, a massive figure named Korik, stood in the center of the room, his eyes glowing with rage. Adrian's mission was clear. He needed to take down Korik. If they could defeat him, the rest of the Vrax forces would fall apart. The leader was the key. Focus on Korik, Adrian shouted to his crew, his voice cutting through the noise of battle. Mara, the ship's pilot, moved quickly, her rifle firing in rapid succession at the smaller Vrax soldiers trying to block their way. She was a crack shot, taking down 2 enemies with pinpoint accuracy. Her eyes never left the target. Got it, she yelled back, taking cover behind a control panel. Zelaria, the Khalji queen, was already in motion, moving like a shadow. Her soldiers, sleek and deadly, followed her lead, using their speed and agility to overwhelm the Vrax. Zelaria was a force of nature, her glowing eyes locked on Korik. She moved toward him, her weapon raised, her every step calculated. Adrian wasn't far behind. He could feel the adrenaline coursing through his veins, but he knew that if they were to win this fight, they had to stay coordinated. His team was the only thing standing between the Vrax and the destruction of the galaxy. They couldn't fail. Korik roared, his massive form charging at Zelaria with the force of a storm. He swung a massive energy blade, and the impact shook the floor beneath them. Zelaria dodged, her movements fluid and precise. She lashed out with her own weapon, striking Korik's arm, but he barely flinched. The warlord was powerful, but Zelaria was no stranger to battle. Adrian saw his opportunity. Korik's attention was momentarily diverted by Zelaria's attack. With a quick move, Adrian closed the distance between them, his blaster aimed directly at the Vrax leader. He fired. The shot hit Korik's chest, but it barely seemed to slow him down. The Vrax warlord grinned, his dark eyes burning with hatred. "You think a single shot will stop me, human?" Korik's voice was like gravel, deep and menacing. Adrian's heart skipped a beat, but he didn't hesitate. He quickly took cover behind a console as Korik turned his fury toward him. Adrian's mind raced. He had to buy time. time for Zilleria and the others to do their part. "Mara, Rhea, cover me," Adrian shouted. Mara quickly laid down suppressive fire, forcing Korek to divert his attention. Rhea, with her tech skills, began hacking into the command center systems, locking down the doors and disabling some of the Vrax's defense mechanisms. The atmosphere was thick with tension. Adrian knew that Korek was the linchpin. The moment they brought him down, the Vrax would lose their will to fight. Zilleria's voice rang out, fierce and determined. "Now, Captain, we strike together." In that instant, Adrian saw the opening. Zilleria's soldiers had cornered Korek, and the Vrax warlord's strength was starting to wane. The Khalji had chipped away at his defenses. Adrian rushed forward, closing the gap between them in a blur of motion. He aimed directly for Korek's weak spot, the vulnerable area in the center of his armor. With a steady hand, Adrian fired again, this time hitting his mark. Korek screamed in rage as the energy blast tore through his chest plate, sending him crashing to the ground. His massive form hit the floor with a heavy thud, the room falling eerily silent. For a brief moment, no one moved. Then, with a final roar, Korek's lifeless body slumped. The Vrax warlord was dead. Adrian felt a wave of relief wash over him. It wasn't over, but this was a turning point. The Vrax leadership had been crippled, and without their leader, the remaining forces would begin to collapse. Zilleria approached Adrian, her face grim but proud. "The first step is done, Captain. But this is only the beginning. We must finish what we've started." Adrian nodded, his eyes burning with determination. "We will. Together, we'll make sure the Vrax never threaten this galaxy again." The battle for Xoreth was far from over, but the tide had turned. The alliance between humans and Khalji was stronger than ever, and as long as they fought together, they had hope. The galaxy was not lost yet. The death of Korek had sent shockwaves through the Vrax forces. The mighty warlord, once thought invincible, now lay in the center of the command room, his body a symbol of their failure. Adrian Ellis and his team stood among the wreckage of the command center, breathing heavily, their minds still sharp despite the exhaustion that weighed on them. The Vrax were regrouping, but the damage had been done. The leadership structure had crumbled, and the enemy soldiers now hesitated, unsure of their next move. The Perseus crew, however, knew their mission wasn't over. The battle for Xoreth wasn't won by just killing a leader. It was won by breaking the enemy's will to fight. Adrian wiped the sweat from his brow, his eyes scanning the room. The air was thick with the smell of smoke and burning circuitry. Outside, the sound of distant explosions reverberated through the walls. The war for the galaxy was far from over, but this battle was a decisive moment. "Captain," Mara's voice broke through the tension, her voice steady despite the chaos. "We've got a problem. The Vrax are retreating, but they're triggering self-destruct protocols all over the fortress. If we don't get out of here fast, we'll be buried under tons of rubble." Adrian's heart raced. The Vrax were not going to make this easy. They had a backup plan in case they lost their leader, and now they were taking the entire fortress down with them. "Rhea, how much time do we have?" Adrian asked, his voice urgent. 30 minutes, Captain," Rhea responded. "The self-destruct system is already active, and it's counting down. We need to move quickly if we want to escape with our lives." "Understood," Adrian said, turning to the team. "All right, everyone, move out. We don't have long." Zilleria nodded, her face cold and determined. She motioned for her Khalji soldiers to fan out, ensuring that the team had a clear path to the exit. The alien warriors moved swiftly, cutting down any remaining Vrax soldiers who dared to challenge them. Adrian led the charge, his eyes constantly scanning for threats. The fortress was now a maze of crumbling walls and dangerous corridors. The blast doors were locked, and the building itself groaned under the strain of the self-destruct countdown. Every step felt like it could be their last. "We're almost there," Mara shouted as they neared the escape route. But just as they thought they were safe, the ground shook violently beneath their feet. A series of explosions erupted from deep within the fortress, throwing the crew off balance. A chunk of the ceiling above them collapsed, sending a wave of debris crashing toward the team. "Take cover," Adrian yelled. The crew scattered, diving for safety. Adrian managed to duck behind a reinforced pillar, narrowly avoiding a falling beam. His heart pounded in his chest as the room continued to tremble. He glanced around, making sure the team was still intact. "We're losing time," Rhea shouted from behind a damaged console. "We need to go now." Adrian nodded, his mind racing. They had to get to the hangar where the Perseus was parked. The ship was their only way off the planet, and the clock was ticking. The explosions outside were getting louder, and the fortress was collapsing faster than they could move. "Zelaria, take point," Adrian ordered. "Get us to the hangar. We'll follow." With the Khalji Queen leading the way, they moved faster. The walls of the fortress continued to crumble, the explosions from the self-destruct system threatening to swallow them whole. But Zelaria's soldiers cleared the path, and the crew pushed forward with everything they had. As they neared the hangar bay, the ground shook once more, this time harder than before. A wave of energy rippled through the structure, and the lights flickered as the self-destruct countdown reached its final moments. "There's the exit," Mara pointed, her voice filled with urgency. The team broke into a sprint, adrenaline pushing them forward. The hangar doors loomed ahead, and beyond them, the Perseus waited, its sleek form the only hope they had left. The Vraks were done, but if they didn't escape now, they'd be buried under the ruins of their victory. Adrian's mind raced. They were almost there. He could see the Perseus now, the hangar door just a few steps away. But as they neared the exit, a final wave of Vrak soldiers appeared, blocking their path. These soldiers were different, desperate and ferocious, willing to die to prevent the humans and Khalji from escaping. "Move," Adrian shouted, his pulse racing. Zelaria's soldiers charged forward, clashing with the enemy. The battle was fierce, but the team fought with everything they had. The Vraks were strong, but Adrian's crew was stronger. The sound of blaster fire filled the air as they fought their way to freedom. Finally, with one last push, the team broke through. The hangar doors opened, and the Perseus was in sight. The team sprinted across the threshold, the self-destruct system's final countdown ringing in their ears. The crew dove into the ship, and the door slammed shut behind them. "Go, now," Adrian commanded. Mara wasted no time. The Perseus engines roared to life, and the ship shot upward, breaking through the atmosphere as the Vrak's fortress exploded in a fiery blaze behind them. They had made it. The battle for Xoreth was won. But the war was far from over. The Perseus soared through the stars, leaving the burning wreckage of the Vrak's fortress behind them. The ship's engines hummed steadily, a comforting sound after the chaos of the battle they had just survived. Adrian Ellis leaned back in his seat, his face grim but filled with determination. They had won the battle for Xoreth, but the war was far from over. Beside him, Zelaria stood tall, her eyes scanning the vastness of space. The Khalji Queen was a force to be reckoned with, but even she knew that defeating the Vrak's leadership was only the first step. The Vraks were a vast empire, and one battle, however significant, was not enough to bring them down. "We've done well, Captain," Zelaria said, her voice calm but filled with pride. "But the true test is yet to come." Adrian nodded. "We've shown the galaxy that the Vraks can be defeated, that they aren't invincible. Now we need to rally the rest of the galaxy. The fight is just beginning." Mara, the ship's pilot, looked over at Adrian from the cockpit. "Captain, we've got a transmission coming through. It's from the Alliance." Adrian straightened in his seat. "Put it through." A moment later, the face of General Orin, the leader of the Galactic Alliance, appeared on the screen. His expression was serious, but there was a glint of hope in his eyes. Captain Ellis, Queen Zelaria. We've been monitoring your success on Xoreth. You've given us something we haven't had in a long time, a chance to win. Adrian's heart quickened. General, what are you saying? We're ready, Orin replied. The Alliance is behind you. We'll join forces and launch a full-scale assault on the Vrax Empire. We have enough resources now, thanks to your success. We're ready to strike. Zelaria stepped forward, her gaze unwavering. The Vrax will regret underestimating the combined might of the Khajiit and humanity. Adrian turned to her, feeling the weight of the decision they were about to make. This wasn't just a fight for Xoreth anymore. It was a fight for the future of the galaxy. The Vrax had pushed humanity and its allies to the brink, but now the tables were turning. The Alliance, the Khajiit, and humanity were united in their cause. General, we'll be ready, Adrian said firmly. We'll rally the forces we need and strike when the time is right. We're with you, Captain, Orin replied. The galaxy is with you. The screen went dark, and the Perseus crew exchanged looks of determination. The battle for Xoreth had been won, but it was only the beginning. They had shown that the Vrax could be beaten, that their tyranny could be brought to an end. But the war was far from over, and there would be more battles to fight. Adrian stood up, his eyes meeting Zelaria's. We've started something big. We've given hope to the galaxy. Now it's time to finish what we've started. Zelaria nodded. Together, we will bring down the Vrax and free the galaxy from their reign. As the Perseus continued its journey through space, the crew knew they were part of something far greater than any single battle. They were part of a united front against the Vrax Empire, a force that would not stop until peace was restored to the galaxy. The road ahead was uncertain, and the challenges would only grow more difficult. But as long as they fought together, they knew that victory was possible. The dawn of a new era had begun. The galaxy was no longer at the mercy of the Vrax. It was time to finish the war. And this time, humanity, the Khajiit, and their allies would lead the charge.